Well, we're talking about leadership here, and I'd like to ask a question. This question was asked of Stéphane Dion. There are many people, when they watch the election campaign, wonder what the appropriate tone is. And I'm tempted to ask everyone this question. Is a good leader nowadays? Well, we've seen negative campaigns, and we've been told that we borrow this from the Americans, for example, but is a good political leader in today's age, does that mean that all things are permitted? All ways of campaigning are permitted. Perhaps there are some ways of campaigning that have struck voters as a bit much. Mr. Giuseppe?
No, I don't think you can do whatever you want. I think you have to show some minimum of judgment. Politics involves men and women who are at the service of the public. They're asking people to trust them, but you have to win that trust. You have to deserve it. You have to be responsible. So in my case, on behalf of Quebecers, I have to represent all the consensuses in Quebec. There are many of them in the National Assembly and elsewhere, and I can say that systematically the Bloc is the only party that brings those consensus opinions to Ottawa. And when you're a minority nation in a country like Canada, that's what's so important.
Mr. Layton, what do you think about this question, the tone of our campaign and the way leaders are campaigning?
The lessons I learned from my grandfather, who was a member of the National Assembly, and he told me that we have to respect everyone despite their viewpoints. And my father said the same thing. He was a member of the House of Commons representing a riding in Montreal, and he would rise in the House, and he didn't like all the personal attacks heard in the House. And you may have heard of the statement made by Mr. Broadbent. He said that the debate was going down, and we had to do something to bring up the level of debate in the House. Ordinary people were the ones who elected all members.
Mr. Broadbent's last speech, I remember that very well. It was wonderfully eloquent. And he talked about human rights, as discussed at the UN. There is respect one to the other in this House of Commons, but that respect is not as much there as it was. I think to be a leader, it's very important to do what Mr. Duceppe said. You are there to serve. You have to listen to what the citizens are telling you.
Well, to be a leader is to have a direction, an objective, to understand that you can't get there alone. Now, my objective is to make Canada more prosperous, more united, but with everybody contributing, bringing down barriers, and you can't do that alone. You have to listen to people, you have to establish a consensus, you have to reach out to people. If you can't do that, if all you can do is go where you want to do and consider anyone who says no to you as being an enemy or political opponent, then you can't be a successful leader for Canada.
I feel the same way. I think that we don't need personal attacks. We have differences in terms of policy, significant differences sometimes, but these differences represent, in the end, the differences of opinion which exist among Canadians. This is this diversity that we represent. But when all is said and done, when you're the government, you have to make decisions. You have to follow through with policies that will benefit everyone, that will bring people together. But when all is said and done, you have to make choices, and you have to accept that sometimes people won't like all of these decisions.
In order, Stéphane Dion and Gilles Duceppe.
Let's go back to this. I'm sorry, you failed here, Mr. Harper. You considered independent scientists, officials as being opponents, political opponents, and you consider political opponents as enemies. You've reduced the level of democracy in Canada. You've done this, even this debate, when you accused a scientist who signed the editorial of the journal, the Canadian Medical Association, have been a Liberal, because he produced a report that you don't like. You've had this problem throughout the election campaign. When the father of a soldier killed in Afghanistan complained about one of your policies, then someone from your party said, well, yes, he's a Liberal. You can't continue like that. We have to have a leader with a sense of pluralism and respect. And we need respect here.
We can disagree without personal attacks. You said, for example, Mr. Dion, that the Medical Association had said something, and that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. And
well, look, Mr. Harper, something else in the House.
We can correct the record, and we can disagree with each other from
You
time
talk
to time.
about the difficulties that you had in managing the war in Afghanistan, for example, with the Afghan detainees under the Afghan government. You described them as being Taliban members. When I said that you're unrealistic about the economic problems in Canada, you said that I was begging for a recession. This is the sort of thing we don't want to hear anymore.
You said that you wanted to indicate you wanted to speak.
To come back to the beautiful words of Mr. Harper, it's all well and good to say what you said, but I think your practices run counter to that. With the Bloc, you've questioned Quebecers' democratic choice. When we're a majority, we won the elections in 93 and 97, 2000, 2006, but your unelected senator came and said, people, that's a waste of money voting for the Bloc. That's disdain for democracy. You may oppose our ideas. You may say we're wrong. That's your point of view. You're entitled to say that that's a democratic debate. But to tell people that a member from the Bloc is a waste of time, a waste of money, well, all MPs are the same. That's the beauty of democracy, and it's shameful for your party to say things like that.
We did not do that. We questioned simply what the Bloc has been able to do after 18 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. May, now if there were to be an election, if there were another minority government, rather, would you be able to work together? Is the option of a coalition something that is a possibility? Mr. Layton, I'm wondering if it's possible given the tone at the table.
The headlines said something about that, and that is what I suggested. As Prime Minister, what I will do, I will bring together the leaders.
Is it possible? Can you work together?
Yes, because we have to. We will bring forward proposals that we have discussed during this election, and we'll say, let's go ahead. Mr. Harper's approach in nearly every circumstance is to reject the motions that were democratically approved by the House. I remember one time you were the leader of the opposition, and you said that we had a moral obligation to respect the decisions taken by elected officials, but you didn't do that. You haven't done that on many occasions. Why?
I don't agree. For example, Jack, you mentioned the Kyoto Bill. You set targets, but no plans to achieve these targets.
Not true. It was in the bill.
It's all well and good to have targets, but in the end, you need to have a way to reach these targets. Our government,
Parliament passed the bill.
I'm not saying that I'm perfect. However, I've led a minority government in a weak position for more than 2.5 years now. That's the longest term for a minority government in the history of this country. Obviously, from time to time, we worked together.
Thank you to all five of you. Ms. May, please.